We worked with the South Korean government, creating a 400-page entrepreneurial curriculum. So like backing myself instead of just like adhering to this male-dominated.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, they also don't really know what they're doing. That would be the dream. The ongoingness of time. So like when you have a bad moment. I mean, entrepreneurship and environmental science converge very well.
Oh man, I don't know.
Americans would be fat. My mom's really interested in Waldorf education.
So that definitely has influenced my worldview.
They're still a multi-ethnic, multi-religious. I petitioned them to send me to boarding school when I was in 8th grade, so like 12 years old. Western society right now is always trying to validate things through economic arguments. So I just take huge issue with statements like that. It's good because it's good for humanity.
It's good. So much, David. I've enjoyed this so much.
We covered like so many different topics.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. It's first week into the Christmas holidays, and we're still recovering from an intense Michaelmas term. This is a special podcast episode as my guests and I are recording in France while on the Oxbridge Varsity ski trip. Funnily enough, my guests and I met while in the spa yesterday afternoon. We've almost reached 4,000 podcast downloads, and if you have been enjoying the discussions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, please do consider leaving a review and nominating a guest by contacting me via my Linktree, David Quan. A highlight has actually been seeing this podcast on people's recent Spotify Wraps for 2022. I cannot thank the guests enough for their courage and insights. So my guest today is Emily Arnold. Emily is pursuing an MPhil in Development Studies at Christ College, University of Cambridge. Her background is in English literature, environmental science and entrepreneurship. Before coming to Cambridge, she worked in management consulting focusing on startup and venture ecosystems, where she was named as one of the Washington Business Journal's 25 under 25 and as the Northern Virginia Tech Council's NextGen leaders. In her spare time, she loves to travel and experience new places, having been to over 40 countries and counting. She loves the outdoors and staying active, practicing yoga, acro yoga, ski racing, hiking, running, and recently as a new Cambridge-ite rowing. She also loves to write creative nonfiction and poetry, mostly about her experiences and adventures meeting people and experiencing new places. Whew, Emily, what a great bio. Sounds like you've been up to a lot of different things. How have you been? And welcome to my podcast, Coffee's on me, David Quan.
Thank you, David. Happy to be here and super excited to join you in this podcast journey. Looking forward to our conversation.
Have you skied before?
I have. I grew up skiing. I was one of those little kids on a leash, and my parents had a little harness on me, and if I fell, they could just pick me up. So I have been skiing my whole life, and I used to ski race when I was in high school.
That's amazing. Well, this week is my first time skiing, and there's a lot to learn, but I feel like I'm starting to pick up, and it's a lot of fun. Have you had great memories with skiing growing up?
Absolutely. Just a lot of nice memories on the mountain, in the snow, and super excited to be here in Val Thorens and exploring the mountains here as well.
Have you met some interesting people?
You, of course.
In the spa.
Yeah, in the spa. I made a lot of new friends in the spa yesterday. And then I also attended the swap yesterday, which was super fun. We don't really have swaps like that in the MCR at Cambridge. It was a whole new cultural experience with lots of games.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, we talked about almost everything yesterday, and I guess one of the impressive things about your work experience is that you were named as one of the DC's, 25 under 25 for class of 2020, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in that article, one of the quotes that they share that you said is that there's something really powerful about aligning an economic model with a mission to create a business that moves the goal forward. With that prompt in mind, do you want to maybe chat a bit about your professional experiences as a management consultant?
Yeah, awesome. So I worked in consulting for about 2.5 years, mostly in startup ecosystems. It was a really unique role because we were such a small firm. So I had the opportunity to be working on our business proposals to new clients and then formulating what that work looked like, project managing, and then also doing all of that work and seeing it come to fruition. I had the opportunity to lead a project for a Fortune 500 company, as well as starting several new accelerators. We worked with the South Korean government, creating a 400-page entrepreneurial curriculum, bringing Korean startups to the US. And yeah, just a lot of exciting projects that I got to work on during that time.
Could you elaborate on the 400-page curriculum for the Korean entrepreneurs entering the US market?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a very cool project. We wrote the whole thing. So it was following from ideation all the way to launching the venture and then to scaling the venture. So kind of in 3 parts. How entrepreneurs coming from a Korean market can expect to enter the US market. So with the unique spin of learning new business practices, where to locate themselves geographically, and how to navigate a US business environment.
That's really cool. One of my signature projects in high school is that I created a 35-page, nothing like 400, a 35-page empathy education curriculum, and I leveraged a lot of kind of entrepreneurship concepts where the younger students who were part of it had to come up with a vision for how they want to create tangible positive change for a cause that they really care about, and you kind of go through that design thinking process, as you say, the ideation all the way to the execution. So as you were creating that curriculum, I'm assuming you're a part of a wider team. What was your focus within that team?
Yeah, so I was mainly project managing. So we had a team of writers who were creating the whole curriculum, and I was doing everything from copy editing to managing what the greater themes that we're writing on were, checking sources and making sure that all the information was accurate. So it was kind of like my project to deliver to the client, and then I had people helping me who were doing all the very hard work writing it.
It's one thing to create a curriculum about any skill, but it's another thing when you have this new dimension of, you know, foreigners entering a new market, and for someone who's so cultured like you, having traveled to 40 plus countries, could you maybe elaborate a bit more on how that enriched the project, if at all, just thinking about the different cultures and, you know, the cultural shocks that entrepreneurs would experience in addition to the business side of barriers?
Yeah, so we had a whole section on this, how like business practices in South Korea would differ greatly from business practices in the US. So we had a whole section detailing what they might be used to and what they can expect coming to a US setting.
What are some of the differences?
Oh man, this was 2 years ago. I remember one of the main differences being like that they might come to the US and realize people are not so polite. As a very simplified version of one of the main differences they might expect to encounter.
That's awesome. And 2.5 years, I guess, working there, helping startups and with all these strategies, and it would have been quite cool. What made you then apply for an MPhil at Cambridge?
Yeah, well, so actually after I graduated from my undergrad, I was meant to do the Peace Corps, which is a US government program where they send you for 2.5 years to a country they partner with, and they'll place you in a community. A lot of people go and teach English, or they're doing public health work. I was meant to be doing community economic development. And then it was 2020 and COVID hit. So this was postponed and it kept being postponed. And so I ended up working for 2 years instead, but I knew I wanted to move into this space of economic development, looking specifically at how entrepreneurship can be a powerful tool to empower people and communities.
Absolutely, and I mean the 2 years work experience would have given you a very diverse skill set, you know, from strategy, project management, data analysis, research design, administration, etc. When you left the company, one of the posts you made, you mentioned that as a woman in business, you didn't always feel confident. And I guess there's been a lot of talk in the past decade, at least, with the glass ceiling, and with who was the Facebook person who did the Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg, about Lean In. And I was wondering, when you made that post, did you have any specific anecdotes of difficulties, or was that just a general uphill battle as you started working in a corporate space?
Yeah, I think it was just a very different space than what I was used to, especially as a 22-year-old graduating from college and then immediately going into a client-facing role. It was definitely kind of a shock where I had to be very confident in what I was presenting. My work was no less good than someone who was 10 years older than me, but I just felt like I was younger than everyone, and I was presenting to all these CEOs of companies. I was like, oh my god, I'm only 22. And also mainly male dominated. And so that's just something that I've been aware of as I've entered the business field, especially in entrepreneurship and venture capital. So less than 3% of venture dollars go to women founders, and trying to invest in women founders and diversify investment strategies in that way.
One of my female friends looking to enter this space, what are two advice you would give her, either about confidence or about anything that you've learned?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one really good piece of advice, I don't know if it's really good, qualifying myself there.
Be confident.
It's one thing that I've thought about a lot, which is that I would get a lot of advice about how to conduct myself in business settings from people in roles superior to me who were men. And their advice was always, yes, be confident, speak up, present yourself in a certain kind of way. And I realized maybe halfway through my 2 years of work experience that wasn't necessarily my style or the way that I wanted to conduct business. And so it was more about finding my voice and how I wanted to present myself and being confident in that. So backing myself instead of just adhering to this male dominated business etiquette that everybody had been telling me I should kind of embody, I guess.
Oh, cool. Very cool. And with entrepreneurship, I mean, it's quite a buzzword. Have you read 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel?
I have not.
Okay. Well, essentially, there's been, I guess, a lot of talk in recent years, especially Andrew Yang as well argues that smart people should build things where the things that push society forward is go from 0 to 1, so you're creating something rather than 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 or 1 to infinity. And they argue that a lot of high achieving, ambitious, talented young graduates are appealed by jobs at a McKinsey or a Goldman Sachs because it's prestigious, it's good pay, great exit option, but actually what those firms do is that they mediate and they facilitate, whereas the entrepreneurs are actually the people who are driving solutions for problems. And is that perhaps one of the reasons why entrepreneurship fascinates you?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah, I think just also with my personality, I'm very interested in learning things all the time and kind of progressing at a fast pace. I know Andrew Yang in his book kind of argues that in terms of top talent, a lot of the top talent is being kind of sucked into investment banking, consulting, those kinds of jobs, which are great training opportunities. Just for me and my personality, I definitely wanted something where I could take more initiative and have responsibility early on because that's how I learn best.
Would you eventually want to start a business of your own?
Yes. Don't ask me what. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, no, that's another of the reasons that my last job was so interesting was because I got to learn about what it takes to start a business. So my job was, part of it was advising startups and helping them with their business practices so that they could grow and succeed. And so I have a very strong foundation and toolkit for when I do figure out what I want to start a business about.
Do you roughly know what area?
No.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I mean, were you working like with startups that were quite early stage, like with VCs, or were you like growth kind of? What stage of the startup were you working with, or a mixture of everything?
Mixture, a lot of early stage through Series A, but not really much past Series A. And we worked with a lot of technical founders, so people who had very technical products and understood their products very, very well, but didn't necessarily have the business experience. So that's where we would kind of come in and help them.
Right, I see. I mean, I did an internship with PwC Raise in London a couple years ago, and the framework that we use to examine VCs were like the 5 M's. So number 1 would be like the market. Is there a market for it? Machine would be their product and their technology. You got money, which is, what kind of fundraising they've got. Any momentum, such as like publicity and publications. And the final one is often, as they taught us, the most underrated one is management. Because at such an early stage, they require so much pivot and changes and adaptations that you're almost like betting on the team rather than the actual initial products that they're working on. And with that in mind, do you agree that when you examine an early stage business, that is more the team that matters? And if so, what are the qualities in your opinions of a successful founder?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we had a similar framework. We would use the 5 T's. So yeah, like team, technology, so like their product, the TAM, so the market essentially, and then the terms, so what their cap table looked like already and if they'd already raised, and now I'm forgetting the 5th T.
It's all right, it's been 2 years.
Lots of T's. But yes, the team, so we would create actually a lot of evaluation systems for new accelerators when we were helping them launch. And the team was always very heavily weighted because, especially like, as you said, at early stage, their product is probably very early. They're going to pivot. They're going to encounter feedback from their customers. Actually, there was a really interesting product session that we had with one of the founders of Gusto. And he kind of was talking about this interplay between, yes, listening to your customers' feedback, but then also like having your vision and knowing where you want to go long term, because your customers' feedback probably isn't looking at this long-term vision. So you kind of have to take both into account. And a good team will have that right focus of, being able to look at the customer and take their feedback, and then also knowing what their long-term vision is and being able to push that part forward as well.
Having seen a bit of the inside look of startups and the challenges that they encounter, do you feel like that inspires you more to go into that space, or do you think there's merit sometimes in, young, naive founders and just throw yourself in the deep end and see what happens?
It might require, like a certain deliberate naiveness, or just optimism, I think is definitely key in entrepreneurship, because you need to believe in your vision to push it forward. It's that like key motivator, like what motivates you to get this thing done. Having seen like the inside working of how like a lot of these startups, and like they have a lot of venture backing, they're super successful if you just look at, like a news article that's been written about them. But then looking into the inside view of that, it's kind of humbling to see like, they also don't really know what they're doing. So it's like, yes, they're super successful and they will be successful, but they're also just human beings, and they also have challenges and struggles and problems as well. And I think that that's kind of inspiring because it makes it more accessible. Like, yes, I could do this too.
I agree. There's something beautiful about being reminded of the fact that everyone we meet is a human being, and therefore, have diverse experiences and also face challenges and uncertainties. And I think what you said about motivation is really important as well, the purpose, right? So you are very active with your yoga, skiing, hiking, running, traveling. What motivates you to explore?
Ooh, I guess just curiosity. Yeah, I mean, it's
Liberal arts education working well.
yeah. I like the world is so big, and there are so many different perspectives, like traditions, ways of knowledge formation, ways of living, and I'm just so curious about, I guess, breaking outside of my little bubble of like how I live my life and how I've been taught to live my life versus based on like what I've been around. And then
on that point,
yeah.
Do you have an example of how you have changed your mind or a habit based on maybe a traveling experience or an encounter with someone or seeing other people do something?
Maybe we can come back to that.
Okay.
I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head.
But sometimes it's just you absorb it and it just becomes a part of you that it's hard to pinpoint, right?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
You just know you're a richer person from it.
Yeah. I guess one example would be like having kind of grown up in just like a very fast-paced, like success-driven little like social circle or bubble, traveling and meeting people doing like various different things with their lives and having various different visions for how to be happy in their life, like what place work has in their life, how they want to form social circles based on family or based on a chosen family, and just seeing just like so much variety in how people approach these different questions has made me question a lot about what I want for myself in those areas of my life.
I'm sure there's a lot of variety based on all these different cultures and even within each culture, different groups with habits, but sure there are some similarities within them as well.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that I love literature and writing as well, is like the best writing, it's like the most specific and unique to that person, but it's also the most general to the human experience. So it, at the same time that it's like so small and detailed, it's also speaking to this great, vaster collective unconscious.
So you love writing creative nonfiction and poetry. Do you want to be a published author if you're not already?
Yes, actually.
That's amazing. I'm not surprised.
That would be the dream. Yes, I spent a lot of time writing in my undergrad. I haven't been writing as much recently, but definitely at some point I'd love to publish a work of my own.
Have there been common themes that you enjoy writing about?
A lot of like how society functions, but from very personal perspectives, like from my own experiences, or when I'm writing like a piece of creative nonfiction, or in a work of poetry, kind of these very like unique and maybe somewhat outside of like mainstream or norm perspectives, but also speaking to like a greater human experience, hopefully.
And is the writing obviously curiosity, obviously an intellectual exercise? Is it also like an escape from reality in a sense?
I think it's like an embellishment of reality, maybe. I'm mostly writing about things that have happened in reality, but it's almost like therapeutic in some ways, kind of like reflecting, unpacking, looking at very, very small details of things that for some reason it's stuck in my head, and then trying to explore that on a page of like, why did this specific image stay in my mind, and is that relatable to other people?
So who do you write for, if for anyone at all?
I do write a lot for myself, like in a journal, and when I was writing my thesis for my undergrad, I realized like I wasn't going to get anything done if I was thinking it had to be perfect and ready for an audience right away. And so I started this practice of just writing something every day. And it could be really, really bad. And that would be that would be totally fine, and just taking the pressure off. So it was just for myself and for just putting something on the page. And then exploring that later and refining it and trying to make it into something.
What's the next step for your writing journey?
I've been doing a lot of that recently, kind of just journaling and not really thinking too much about an audience. But I would love to create some sort of larger work or start working on something about some of my adventures abroad and traveling. And yeah, like kind of a collection of like fragments of different things.
That's really interesting. I also keep a journal. I call it homework for life. Every night I just note down some of the cool things and what I've learned from people, and sometimes it feels like a drag to do it, but I think it's super meaningful, especially when you have like a bad day, or at least for me, when I have a bad day, I can then go back to like previous days and, go, oh, if I survived that, or, oh, wow, like it just adds a kind of sense of like time and scale to life that I feel like our memory cannot always be relied upon.
Yes, I love that concept. I think Sarah Mancuso writes about this, and she calls it ongoingness, and reminding ourselves of like the ongoingness of time. So like when you have a bad moment or a bad day, and just realizing like life is ongoing, and you'll have more bad days, but you'll also have good days, and it kind of balances out.
Absolutely. At Georgetown, your background in English literature, environmental science, and entrepreneurship, it's a fascinating combination. Did many other people also took those kind of majors and minors?
At Georgetown, there were definitely a lot of kind of diverse combinations of subjects that people studied. I'm not aware of anyone in my cohort who did those three as well.
How do you see them as a trinity interplaying?
Oh my goodness. They definitely interact in different ways. I'm not sure that they converge in like one super cohesive way. Entrepreneurship and environmental science converge very well in terms of like climate tech, sustainability, entrepreneurship, just using entrepreneurship as a tool to, fight climate change and reach our sustainability goals. And then environment and English interact in a really interesting way. I actually did a environmental journalism internship during my undergrad, kind of focused on that. And then my thesis was also exploring environmental themes in poetry. So they kind of coexist in this way here. I'm not really sure how English and entrepreneurship interact. I guess just critical thinking.
Yeah, critical thinking, and I don't know if you watch like Dead Poets Society.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the quotes, I'm paraphrasing, but like law and all these professions, they're important, but we as humans exist for the art, the literature, for the spiritual, and I think English literature is just such a great foundation to have, and I only wish I had read more as a kid.
Yeah, wait, that's so true. It's kind of about this creation. They're both like, entrepreneurship is about creating worlds, creating new things, like the 0 to 1 concept you're saying. And English and writing for me is about the same thing, creating worlds, but through a very different means.
I guess one of the other interesting points about that combination is they all have different metrics for measuring progress or success. So environmental science, you got all the global warming reports and the temperature, etc., carbon emission. Entrepreneurship, you can measure it by like fundraising and scale or products, etc. With English literature though, you don't is it right to assume that it's harder to measure progress?
Yes, I would say so. It's so subjective. I think there's like I focused a lot on writing in all of the courses that I took, and it was something that I found was extremely hard to teach. Like, how do you teach and how do you assess that when you have a group of students, submitting their creative nonfiction essays about their life? Like, how do you assess one person's story versus another person's story? Because it's, at the end of the day, it's their story.
Absolutely. However, though, for your journey, you've had these major milestones of winning the 25 under 25 and other NextGen Leaders Awards. When you saw the announcement that you were one of the recipients, what did it feel like? It must have felt really good, but like, what did it mean to you in the context of where you were in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, for those two, they were both related to the work that I was doing in my last job. So it was actually really cool to have that recognition because we were such a small firm, and the kind of responsibility that I was taking on so early and all of the work that I was producing, like, I wasn't expecting to be recognized for it. So it was really cool to gain those awards and have that recognition. But at the same time, it was, I don't know. It felt a little different than, something like you produce a work of art or like some book that you publish and people love it, because it's not exactly like you're exposing the judges to all of the work that you've done. It's more kind of your work still stays in the business because it's the business world. So they're never going to really know like everything that you contributed, I guess.
Right. And moving on to like traveling, which country has surprised you the most?
I think when I visited Vietnam, I was very surprised because they are technically a communist country. And then going there and seeing just like the vibrant market spaces was not what I was expecting. From how I had envisioned communism prior to that trip. I would say similarly, I visited Cuba as well. And so also as a communist country, it was very, very different than visiting Vietnam. For example, if you go into a grocery store in Cuba, there is like one brand of every single product. There's no variety of brands. And then often a lot of the shelves would be completely empty. And that was kind of shocking and different from walking into an American grocery store where you have just like a million different brands of one single product. And so much, choice.
And I'm sure there are moments of traveling when you feel like you're out of your depth or out of your comfort zone, just totally unfamiliar. Do you have any like general strategies for coping with unknowns?
Yes, so also Vietnam was my first true like solo trip. And so, I've traveled a lot in Central and South America, but I speak Spanish. So that makes it just a lot more accessible and easy to ask for directions or figure out where I'm going. And in Vietnam, I had kind of planned out my trip a lot more because it was the first time that I was traveling by myself and I didn't speak the language and it's not in the Latin alphabet. So I had planned out my trip. I had organized a taxi already to meet me at the airport and bring me to the hostel. And then I just booked a couple of excursions to the mountains and to Halong Bay through the hostel. So that was a little bit easier to navigate an unfamiliar place.
People and nature are often, two core components that you get to experience while traveling. Do you aim for a combination, like exposure for both, or is there one of them that you perhaps prioritize more?
I definitely go for a combination of both. I love cities and I also love being out in nature. And hiking and skiing and getting to experience just like very unique and biodiverse like different kinds of landscapes and places. And then cities, though, are so cool to see the culture and vibrant life of just people going about their day on like a normal day when you're just there kind of observing. Yeah.
Where is your dream city to perhaps live long term?
Oh man, I don't know. So I'm living abroad now in England, from the US. And I definitely want to keep living abroad and either staying in England for a little bit and then probably moving somewhere else. But it's a very different experience when you get to spend an extended period of time in one place versus traveling when you're kind of seeing surface level, a lot of different places and moving very quickly through them.
So with yoga then, is that like just a kind of a hobby, or is it also for you to give you like peace of mind perhaps, or just give you some sense of stability? Because I just get the feeling that you obviously get to see so much, and sometimes it can be difficult to just always move around. And
yeah, I think yoga and meditation are definitely tools for me to stay grounded, especially when I'm moving around all the time. Yeah, I did gymnastics for a long time growing up, and when I got to my undergrad, I needed some sort of physical outlet, and I started doing a lot of Baptiste power yoga, which is like a hot power practice. And I loved that. So then I did my yoga teacher training.
oh wow, you can teach yoga.
Yeah, I haven't been teaching much, but it was very, very interesting to learn more about the practice and where it comes from and the different traditions that are involved. Yeah.
How good were you at gymnastics? And
I competed into like level 8, so there's like 11 levels, like 10 plus elite. And then I had a wrist injury, so I had to quit, unfortunately. But I did love it. It was so much fun.
Wow, that's so cool. And you grew up in America, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And now having gone outside of America, do you feel like there's any like misconceptions that people either have about America or Americans have about, Western or other cultures, especially in the East?
Both, yes. Yes, I do distinctly remember when I was, 12 years old, so in 8th grade, I lived for 3 months in Switzerland on this kind of exchange program, skiing for 3 months in the Swiss Alps. And one of my classmates was from Costa Rica, and she was like, I remember distinctly her saying that she thought that Americans would be fat. And of course, this is coming from like a 12-year-old's perspective. But for some reason that just stuck in my head. But I think traveling a lot more and meeting other people, they're not always sure what to expect from Americans, especially given more recent political situations in the US. But yeah, so that's always been interesting. Sometimes people think I'm from Canada, and then I'm always like, yes, I can go incognito. Like, no one needs to know where I'm from. And then in terms of US misconceptions, yes, so many. I mean, it's just impossible probably to understand at, a granular level mostly that there are different ways of living, I think, is probably the biggest misconception that Americans have, because it is kind of the big hegemonic world power at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess for you, like, by doing all the things that you do, you get a first-hand kind of insight into the different ways of knowing and ways of doing things. So had you not travelled as much, let's say if we lived in a parallel universe, would you pursue similar hobbies such as, development, entrepreneurship, or would you be quite a different person? I know it's hard to know for sure, but thought experiment if you didn't travel to 40 countries.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I would still definitely be engaged in entrepreneurship. I think that was something that I was always interested in from a young age. I would make all these things and go around my neighborhood trying to sell them to people. So that's just always been in my blood. But in terms of development studies, like, it was kind of a long journey to find my way to this subject and realize this was something that I was passionate about and wanted to pursue even in this world. So in a parallel world where I hadn't traveled or been exposed to all these different things, I don't know if I would have found my way here.
I guess what really impresses me, well, one of the many things that impresses me about you is you seem to have really this positive ambition to make an impact on the world and to leave your own unique mark on community. And I know that the people we meet obviously impact a lot of our values and the experiences that we had. But since when did you realise that you really had a burning desire to do something, to build something? And like, for me, I can think of, like, you know, my teenage years in school where community service was a massive thing. You know, what drove me up every morning was that if I do well in this or if I do that, then I can have a great impact on my community. Did you ever have a period of time or a moment of time where things just really, just something within you just felt warm and you just felt motivated?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that I can think of two things right away from this question. One was that I kind of grew up in, like, my mom's really interested in Waldorf education. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Waldorf education, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a German education philosophy.
I write essays on that.
Really? Yes, of course. Yes, you study education. So my mother...
Alternative schooling, yeah.
Yes. She is an educator as well. She's very interested in Waldorf education. And so she started the preschool that I went to, which was a Waldorf preschool. In an early childhood, very play-based and being outdoors in nature and socializing.
Makes so much sense now. The dots are connecting. Wow.
Yes. And then in, elementary school years, it's very, like, tactile. So we did a lot of knitting and woodwork and painting and being outdoors and learning about other cultures, but more from, like, a story perspective rather than, like, these dates happened and memorize these facts kind of thing. So that definitely has influenced my worldview and just the way that I grew up like that. And then kind of when I reached, like, middle school, like, I guess, like, 11 to 13 years of age, I was in the public school in my town, and we had a assembly, I guess, where we had a guest speaker coming to speak about climate change. And so that was maybe one of my first experiences about learning about the problems of our current world. Because I did grow up in a very privileged household, in this kind of wholesome Waldorf school way, like, not necessarily knowing that there's massive inequality and climate change and all of these issues going on in our world today. So then when I did become exposed to those things, it was immediately, my response was like, we have to do something about this. Like, how do I help change this? And so that's kind of been my response ever since then.
That's amazing. I mean, the Waldorf model is also the Steiner education.
Yes.
And the primary school I went to actually had a Steiner stream.
Oh, very cool.
Although none of us really at the time understood what it meant, but you could just see their education was different. Like, there wasn't technology.
Yes.
It was more focused on, like, gardening, outdoor music, art. And I'm quite sure, at least in my primary school, there wasn't that assessment component.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think some parents see great value in letting kids be kids and let them develop at their own pace and stage. And it's quite cool how kind of that education style for you, plus that, that first initial moments of recognizing that there are problems in the world and these problems demand, solutions from people. That's amazing. That's really, really cool. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you ever want to be a mother, but would you want your kids to have that kind of alternative educational experiences as well?
Yes, I think so. I would definitely follow something like that for my own kids. just in terms of how I think it's taught me to be intrinsically motivated, and aligning my values with what I actually want to do in the world. I think that's been super important for me in my life.
That's amazing. That's really cool. So on the theme of, I guess we started with problem solving, and maybe we'll come back to problem solving as well, but in the development context, so many issues are featured in the field of development. Are there one or two that you're particularly passionate about?
Yes, so I came into the program thinking that I would focus on entrepreneurship and environment because that is my background. But the course is so interdisciplinary, and I'm learning about economics, development economics, sociology and politics, and then I'm learning about sustainability and some regional courses as well, which are kind of combining all these different disciplines. And so for now, my focus is kind of broader and incorporating all of these disciplines. And so I'm not really sure where that's going to take me. So I guess I came in with a narrow focus and I got more broad.
Sounds like a great education.
Yeah.
And at Cambridge, you started rowing.
Yes.
How often do you do it, and how early do you have to wake up?
Yes. It's a lot. So we train like three days a week on the water. So 2 mornings a week where, depending on when the sun's coming up, there's lighting down is what they call it, which is a couple minutes before the sunrise. And that's when we can push off and go on the water. So there were a couple days where I was waking up at 5:45 before the clocks changed, or rather after the clocks changed. And then we train 4 times a week doing land training.
And is rowing an extension in the the gymnastics, yoga, than rowing, or is rowing a completely kind of different thing where you're challenging yourself outside of your comfort zone?
I'd say a bit of both. When I, signed up to start learning how to row, they were like, "What's your sporting background?" And I said I did gymnastics. And they're like, "Oh, that's great. It translates really well into rowing."
Does it?
Yeah, which I had not expected that at all.
I'm not sure in the boats you need to be flexible and doing flips.
Yeah, well, it's about having the right rowing form.
Okay.
So having like the bodily awareness, where you can pick up like the correct form, to like maximize your power output, is I think more what it's about. And then, in terms of like being able to like listen to the cox or the coach, and they're giving you feedback in real time, and you're also working really hard physically, so your brain just doesn't function as well. So being able to like do all those things at once, it's really helpful when you have kind of a diverse sporting background, to be able to pick that up.
How else would you describe, I guess, your experiences of Cambridge so far? Because Cambridge is enormously intense with, 8-week terms and everything jam-packed there, and a lot of kind of Oxbridge traditions, like Bridgmas, for example, like celebrating Christmas a month early. Your first 8-9 weeks would have been quite like a roller coaster, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It was a lot to, jump straight into coursework, and then also college life, which is so fun, and I love it so much, but I wish I had more time to be social. And then also learning how to row. So doing lots of things and wishing there was more time in the day, but loving every second of it.
If you had 2 more hours a day, what would you devote it to? Would it be something existing or something new?
If I had two more hours a day, is that what you said? Yeah. I would probably devote it to kind of more like reflective, calmer, like personal me time. So writing, meditation, maybe some yoga. I think that would help me balance out my schedule a little bit. That would be very nice.
That's awesome. And for the upcoming Christmas holidays, you got 4 pieces of work to do. Do you want to maybe talk a bit about what they are and how they fit into your kind of holiday schedule?
Yes.
If you have a holiday at all.
Yes, well, I will be working over the holiday. Yeah,
As every Cambridge student.
Yes.
It's very sad.
I know. Yeah, so I'm starting working now already on a essay for my course on Central Asia. So I'm looking at specifically the Mongol Empire to 1991 as like one period of connected space for the Central Asian region, especially with during the Mongol Empire, like trade flourished, the economy was very vibrant, and how they were able to work with different nomadic, sedentary, and semi-sedentary groups, many different ethnic groups, and many different religious groups as well, in one connected space. And then how post-1991, after the imposition of Westphalian state into this area, we have borders that they had never had borders before, like militarized borders. They'd never had borders like that before, and how this impacts their ability to work together in this, I mean, they're still a multi-ethnic, multi-religious space, and how that affects their ability to function within there.
That's very, very cool. Very exciting.
Yes, yeah. It's very interesting. I'm excited to write it.
Given that this podcast is about giving guests a legacy-worthy interview, capturing a snapshot of who you are at this point in time, and you can keep the recording and hopefully look back in decades' time, I've got some final questions, but before then, is there anything else that you feel like is really, really important in terms of your story at the moment that you want to be included in the recording?
I think we covered like so many different topics. I can't think of anything specific.
Great. Well, I've got 3 final questions.
Okay.
I guess they're prompts. They're giving you a chance to tap in different areas of your brain. But first one would be like, who are the role models that you look up to? They could be celebrities. They could be people that you know in your life, and who inspires you to do more, be more, and.
That's a really good question. I think a lot of my role models tend to be authors. So one of my favorite authors is Michael Ondaatje. He wrote The English Patient, which is kind of a post-World War II snapshot of some people in an Italian villa dealing with their post-traumatic stress, basically. But it's just so, like, the topic doesn't even matter. It's just so beautifully written. He also is a poet, and it's just so, like, lyrical and beautiful, and that is just something that has very much inspired my writing, and then also just my life in terms of how you view a situation and what you make of it. So much of the world, there's a really good quote from a Mary Oliver poem. It's like, whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself up to your imagination. That's probably not an exact quote. But basically it's like the world around us and how we experience it, we're always going to experience it through our imagination, but we have some element of control over that. So yeah, I guess that's one way that I see the world and try to live my life in it.
That's beautiful. Very optimistic message.
Yeah.
Second to last question would be, what has been the best investment you have ever made? And it doesn't necessarily have to be financial, but any investment.
Financially, I do invest in wine, which is a little bit of a rogue investment, but I think it's very fun and it's a good way to diversify your assets, especially in a tumultuous economy of right now. In terms of other investments, definitely education. And this is not an investment that I made. It was an investment that my parents made, but I petitioned them to send me to boarding school when I was in 8th grade, so like 12 years old. I wanted to be able to study things in more depth and kind of have a more rigorous academic experience. And so I petitioned them to apply to boarding schools in the U.S.
So they were initially resistant, or
It just wasn't something that had
thought
been
about.
brought up or thought about.
How did you then, as a 12-year-old, think about that?
Yeah, actually, well, I guess it was my experience with Waldorf and one form of alternative education. And then I also had a friend, I danced for a while, and so I danced with her, who went to a charter school, which is like a different kind of independent school. And I was so fascinated hearing about her, the different ways that she could approach her coursework and study what she wanted to study in a high school setting. So I started doing some research on my own and decided that I wanted to apply to boarding schools. But I think that was...
one of the best decisions. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. It was so fantastic, like academically amazing. And I had the chance to study ancient Greek, which has also been like a very fun thing that I'm passionate about, that I've done for a long time.
Socially too, I guess, just to live with people and see a different side of them, much like the Cambridge College experience.
Yeah, it is similar to the Cambridge College experience.
But you're going through, you know, puberty and those like most transformative time with your peers, which, you know, the friendships you formed there, I'm sure, is quite tight.
Absolutely, yes. I'm still so close. Two of my best friends are from my high school experience there. But also just the ways that it challenged us to think critically and explore kind of different topics that we were interested in. And I just remember having like all these vibrant debates with my classmates at dinner or like, you know, sitting on the circle in the boarding school. So yeah, something I'm very grateful for. And then I also had the chance to pursue singing and theater and sports and everything else that
I love a holistic education. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think giving kids the opportunity to try out many things without the pressure is so profoundly valuable. I'm just going to add one more question, given that you mentioned about critical thinking. This one's probably pretty hard, but the last one is a bit easier, so you got something to look forward to. So building on what you said about critical thinking, and it's kind of a recurring theme. You're always thinking different, and you're always trying to innovate and be creative. Is there like a belief or a truth, in your opinion, that is it for you, but for most other people, they either don't believe it or haven't realized it yet? If that makes sense. Something that you deeply believe, but others either don't realize it or don't believe it. So how are you a contrarian, basically?
Yeah. I think one thing that I just like strongly at my core believe, and it feels, contrary to a lot of the mainstream culture of Western society today is, Western society right now is always trying to validate things through economic arguments. Like, yes, this makes sense financially.
Neoliberalism.
So, like, you know, we're validating, or that's not quite the right word, but like, you know, saying diversity is good because it's economically beneficial. So I just take huge issue with statements like that. Because at my core, like, it's good because it's good for humanity. It's good for the sake of the individual people involved, and for the collective society as a whole.
And that's one of the criticisms that neoliberal authors would say about like Steiner's schools is it's hard to measure progress, whereas, you know, standardized testing, no child left behind.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, Cambridge is the place to be to make these arguments and have these conversations, and I still grapple, I think, with, because sometimes I find that there's a lot of critique of neoliberalism and the economic arguments, but like those critiques are very valid, but what's the alternative?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, final question and a final chance for you to share anything that feels important is, what's one quote, message, or saying that you wish every educator would promote and every child would internalize? Your message to the world.
Oh my goodness. I think that's harder than the last question. A quote or a message for educators?
A saying or a concept.
I mean, I think I would say something, I don't have a specific quote for this, but along the lines of like being intrinsically motivated. Actually, here's a good one. When I was in high school, I had a really hard year in my second year of high school. And so coming out of that, I realized, I was like, okay, for this third year of high school, I want to have these specific intentions, and I'm going to try to live by these intentions. And so they were to be intrinsically motivated, to be, this was how I put it, was to be your own cookie, because I thought at times that it could be a bit of a cookie cutter culture where I was. To live for the magic, so to always seek out adventure, kind of what I was saying earlier, like the world offers itself to your imagination. And, okay, wait, no, it was just 3. Those were my 3 ones, right? Now I'm second guessing myself. But I would say something along those lines, like find what you're passionate about, because the world needs passionate people.
Very, very inspiring. What I find magical is that we just struck up a conversation in the spa and it's led to this, and no, it's been wonderful, and I really, really just enjoyed chatting with you yesterday. I think you're incredibly thoughtful, super humble as well, and I think your curiosity is really just infectious, and it makes me want to go out and explore a lot more and to experience new things. And thank you also for being very honest and transparent about some of the transformative experiences that you've had, and definitely a lot of food for thought. So I hope you have a great week at the varsity trip, and hopefully I'll see you around.
Thank you so much, David. I've enjoyed this so much, and I love kind of spontaneous interactions, and glad I could be here.